Give it one more minute just in case anyone dials in, and then we'll jump right into this. I'm sure everyone wants to hang out with us on that. One Tuesday, yeah, Tuesday evening.
Talk about wastewater.
It was about as exciting to read as War and Peace. It was a long, I got to 65, page 65.
The executive summary is there for a reason.
Yes, I got to the part with the birds and the flowers, and I'm like, okay.
That's when it starts getting good.
But my passing comment to Administrator Waite when I came in, if a pitcher could smell, they were coming through loud and clear on that. That manhole cover, I don't know where that was, showing the screen and, like, no, I ain't going to that, no. Couldn't pay me enough, not even gonna go and see it.
I think they're talking about the digester that.
It must have been.
Yeah.
Oh, you have to crawl in.
Yes.
It was disgusting, whatever it was, you know.
Oh, no, that's a joy.
Yeah.
It's only 30 BC.
It made your, little clean out tube thing look really nice and clean and nice. So, okay, let's go ahead and pull this meeting together. Flaxman. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, everyone, welcome to our second council meeting in February here, special council session to review the wastewater facility plan and also appoint a budget officer. Those are the two primary agenda topics. So with that, I will hand it over to Civil West on the wastewater facility plan review.
Oh, I'm Matt Wadlington, Civil West Engineering, engineer of record, and put together this wastewater facilities plan. I promised Mike I'd keep this to under 2 hours, so it should be an early night.
That's
Yeah, this should take about 10 minutes. So what I want to, so we'll start off, I'll just tell you what I'm going to talk about. We'll review kind of the wastewater planning process, how that works. Go through a description of the existing wastewater plant, talk about expected growth in the city, tell you what issues we found, and then kind of review the capital improvement plan that will fix those issues. So the facility planning, obviously the purpose is to plan for future improvements so the city can budget and anticipate costs and improvements that are going to be necessary. The main steps of facility planning are to review the existing system, develop growth projections, determine how much additional flow the city's going to have, look through the regulatory DEQ requirements, then kind of compare what you have now versus what you're gonna need in the future and identify deficiencies, and then develop a plan to address each of those deficiencies over the course of the planning document. So it's a 20-year planning document. So the existing system, you have a conventional treatment system, which means that wastewater goes in, it gets aerated, bugs grow, thrive, eat the nasty stuff in the wastewater, and then you separate those bugs, dead bugs, from the now clean water and discharge that water into the creek. That's very simplified, but that's basically what's happening. So you discharge into Mill Creek, which is located right behind the plant. You have a permit with DEQ for that discharge. Your permit was just renewed last year. So brand new permit. So looking a little bit more at the existing system, you do preliminary screening, which happens as the pump station that pumps everything into the water treatment plant. The first step is it gets screened. It goes through a spiral screen that pulls out as much of the solids as it can. Then you go to a aerobic biological treatment, which I briefly described earlier. Bugs live in the water, you provide air, they grow, multiply, eat the biologic content in your wastewater, and then they die. And so then you separate those bugs from the water. So that's called clarification, that separation. Then you disinfect the remaining water. Right now you disinfect with ultraviolet light and then discharge to the creek. You take those solids, the dead bugs, that's your sludge, and you can digest that, get it thicker and lower volume so that you have lower volume to dispose of. Right now, that volume of sludge gets thickened. The volume gets reduced, the sludge gets thickened. The city has a centrifuge to do that. Centrifuge doesn't really work very well. It takes more manpower than the city has to run it. And so it really doesn't get operated. So that's one of the things that we've identified.
So they currently bypass it then at that point, if we're not operating it? Do we just let the water naturally separate from it and dump the sludge into the pit wherever we store?
Yeah, so right now you get rid of a liquid sludge versus running through a centrifuge where you would thicken it and have a more solid that you would then be able to land apply. And Mike, am I correct? Right now the solids get sent off the site in
Yes.
liquid form. So
Yes.
So you have a great dewatering facility down there, but it relies on this centrifuge that is just too cumbersome for the city to operate. It would take another full-time staff just to operate this full-time. Looking at expected growth. So the city has a current population of just under 3,500. When we're doing wastewater facilities plans, DEQ sort of requires that we use the Portland State University growth numbers that they project. In this case, we wanted to be more conservative since there's a big development in the city that could come any day. So we wanted to bump that population and then go to the PSU numbers. So that's how we did the report with a higher population, expecting a bigger development sometime early in this planning period. So DEQ is still looking at this report. That they're kind of hung up on that issue about population and whether or not they can accept us saying that the population may be higher than what Portland State says because of this looming development that's out there. Regardless of what the population is, the flows will increase, with population. So the flows are going to increase, whether or not it's as much as we think it is. It's going to be some. Most of the flows from residential customers are pretty minor. Most of the peak flows that the city sees are from inflow and infiltration of stormwater into the wastewater system. So you have a average day flows of 0.2 million gallons a day, and the peak flows during the winter are I don't know, I have the number, Mike, are they 3
Yeah,
MGD?
yeah.
So it's peaking 15 times your base flow because of stormwater inflow. So when you're expanding the plant, a lot of what you're doing is expanding the plant to be able to treat stormwater flows. So one of the lowest hanging fruits on doing wastewater treatment is getting rid of that stormwater infiltration so that you don't have to treat as much wastewater. So one of our early recommendations is doing some inflow and infiltration repairs. So issues identified, we're gonna just go through these relatively quickly. The wastewater treatment plant effluent frequently exceeds the thermal load limit. So the DEQ puts a limit on the temperature of the water that you're discharging into the creek. That's for primarily for salmon in the creek. The limit has been in the permit for a number of years. This isn't a new limit in your new permit. So the city hasn't been able to meet that for a number of years. We're actually talking with Mike and Linda and working with DEQ to enter into an agreement with DEQ on how we're going to be able to get to that. In exchange, we set up a schedule on how we would do that in exchange for DEQ saying that they'll let us work with that schedule and are going to find the city based on those exceedances. Number two, multiple areas in the city's collection system were observed to have direct sources of stormwater inflow or groundwater infiltration. So this is that inflow and infiltration that I was talking about. So we identified 4 or 5 different areas that we feel are low hanging fruit, that you can get a lot of bang for your buck by doing some minor treatments and removing a lot of water from the well. Number 3, the pump near the wastewater treatment plant that pumps all the wastewater up to the wastewater treatment plant is undersized. It doesn't have the capacity to treat the peak flows that we're expecting to see. It's also past its useful life that we would expect to see for a pump station, and so we would recommend replacing that. The existing solids dewatering centrifuge, like I mentioned earlier, it isn't operable with your current staff, and it's getting additional staff and operate it is probably not worth the cost of that additional person to operate it. So we would recommend installing a different style of dewatering. Screw press is pretty hands off. You put it in there, it turns on automatically when flows go to it, and it runs. It takes minimal staff to oversee it, and so it can kind of do everything on its own. Whereas the machine that you have down there now just takes a lot of babying to make it work. The next is the existing UV disinfection is undersized. DEQ requires that for redundancy, so there's a backup. You always have to have 2 of every unit so that you can do maintenance. If something goes down, something breaks, you have a backup source. So there are a couple different things at the wastewater treatment plant that don't currently have redundancy. Your UV is one of them. You've got a single bank of lights. It's old. I think Mike is having to find spare parts from other wastewater treatment plants on the coast, and just trying to get pieces to limp this along. So it should be upgraded and improved to meet that redundancy requirement, as well as just to bring to the current century. Number 6, the city lacks a redundant secondary clarifier. So if you look at that picture of the wastewater treatment plant, the clarifier is the middle circle, and did I do that? You should have 2 of those for redundancy. If you need to get in there, clean that out, which you should do occasionally, you can't do with only one of them because it always needs to be in operation. So should have a secondary, redundant secondary clarifier. The city could also be more efficient if they had another clarifier. That's probably the biggest thing that we've identified in the plan is that secondary clarifier. Number 7, this goes back to the inflow and infiltration a bit. sections of the city, should be TV to see what's happening in the pipes, see if there's more stormwater getting in. That should be kind of an annual project to TV those sewer lines. Number 8, the existing headworks, which is the screen, has a difficult time handling the amount of fat and grease and oil that get to the plant. What it does is the current screen ends up just taking it and pushing the grease through the screen, and you end up with little grease balls that go through the system and are just harder to treat downstream. So we would recommend replacing the screen with one that's better suited for higher fats, oils, and greases. Number 9, the existing aeration equipment is expected to surpass its useful life by the end of the planning period. The aerators that are in there are outside, so they're getting hit by the weather. They're also really pretty loud. They probably are louder than the city's noise ordinance allows them to be. So it'd be great to get new aerators that are new, quieter, more efficient, and put them inside a building so that they're last a little bit longer and are quieter. And then the existing sludge pump for one of the solid digesters. So this is, 3 digesters, and those will deal with your solids. It's at the bottom of the digester. It's at the bottom of a 30-foot manhole. It's almost impossible to get down there and maintain. I've talked to Mike about this for a number of years. He'll fix the pump, and then next year it goes bad again. And the only way to deal with it is to do a confined space entry and get down there. So we're looking at ways to get the sludge out of that digester without having to have that pump arrangement at the bottom of the manhole. So next slide is the capital improvement plan. So this identifies, goes through and talks the same projects we just talked about, puts a number to it. Priority 1 projects are ones that we think are probably due within the first 5 years. Priority 2 projects are a little bit farther out than that. The priority 1 projects, we have at 3.6 million. Priority 2 projects are 2.5 million. That's my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
On the CCTV, the south, the area right where I'm from, I looked at your map, and it looks like the primary area you're concerned about, at least from what you were saying, is on the east side of town, is what it looked like. You had a little red mark, kind of saying that this is an area that we should really make sure we do it. Besides an annual review.
Are you referring to that?
Yeah,
That map?
perhaps. There was a lot of maps in there, but one of them showed where you kind of went through with, how the piping or existing system looks. I think on the east side, you did show one area where you were concerned.
Yeah, so there, and Clint, maybe you can talk about it, but based on the flows that we expect to see, there were areas over there that we were thinking that it's likely that there might be other issues.
So it's leaking potentially.
Potentially.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. We're not seeing the flow we expect. Okay.
Yeah, we measured the flows late at night, and we didn't expect it to be a lot of wastewater flow and unexplained flow increases in those segments.
So normally when we're doing I&I, there are a few different methods of us trying to find out where this is happening. One of them is the smoke testing, where we'll come out during the day and blow smoke in the manholes, and where it comes out are either other manholes, which is okay, or
Okay.
through vents and houses, which is not okay, or out storm drain inlets, which is not okay.
Now, you actually did that.
We
if I
did.
recall. Yeah, I remember having the city warn that, yes, we're blowing smoke.
And the other,
I know that's something.
the other way is to come out in the middle of the night, like I was saying, where we expect that the flows, most of the flows that are happening are from inflow of stormwater. And so we'll go out and we'll measure flows in one manhole, and we'll go to the next manhole and measure flows there. And if those two aren't substantially equal, then we think there's probably a source somewhere between those where stormwater is getting in.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, so you're measuring the delta between the two access
Exactly.
points.
And so based on that, we've identified these areas that we think there could be some inflow into the system.
Second question, going back to your issue number 2, you have a patch of void. How big is a void? To me, I mean, a void could be massive, it could be small, but I mean, that scares me. I mean, a void is actually a missing pipe in this case, or?
No, I think this is a void in the manhole.
Okay. Yeah, right there.
Or
So
there's a void in main B. Do you remember what that is?
It's a hole in a pipe.
Okay,
It's
so
a
it
10-inch
is-
pipe and about 6-inch diameter hole.
Yeah, a lot of times it happens where you're doing taps for services and even, that service may get pulled out and the hole doesn't get repaired, or the service is still there, but there's a big void around it where, they used to grout those in, and a lot of times that grout would go away and fall into the pipe and get washed away, and so now you just have a big void.
which could also potentially cause other artifacts to fall into it,
Sure.
causing blockages, rocks.
So
So
I mean, those are, so small voids like that, as long as you're not missing a section of the pipe are relatively easy to fix. You can put a piece of pipe down in there, it goes and inflates and seals to the pipe and you repair it from the inside. It's not super expensive, but you can reduce your inflow quite a bit by doing those sorts of repairs.
Hey, Matt, can I add something here? What you're usually talking about with I&I is that you've got gaps or cracks or tree roots or something that generally invades the collection system. And that allows, especially in the winter, when the groundwater comes up because of the heavy rains, it allows infiltration into that system. It's very rare to actually have a break to where you're losing wastewater into the groundwater. It usually goes the other direction. You're getting groundwater into the collection system. That's what causes the extra high flows down the plant. Just wanted to make that clear that and usually it's an and not an and.
Right.
it would make sense. I mean, just compressing the inflow, as you would call it. I mean, it could save us a lot. Thus, we're peaking in the winter time primarily because of that infiltration. How deep is that particular pipe buried, or that section?
I'm not looking at it, but we do have some that are, in my opinion, extremely vulnerable. The main line running down B Street is over 20 feet deep.
Okay, that's pretty.
The line coming in from the industrial area of town runs along Little Bear Creek, and I've for years have had a notion that line was not put in correctly. So if we do this, that would be one of the first places I would look because it runs directly underneath the creek.
And our water table during the wintertime raises pretty high. I mean,
Yeah.
up to, dig down 8 feet, you got water.
Normally the sewer line's 8 to 10 feet deep. So unless it's one of those that's extra deep, that's a normal depth for sewer.
I don't mean to ask all the questions. Council, other questions you might have?
Got some comments and questions. Talking about infiltration, water flows. Remember a number of years ago, we did a camera down several of our pipes. We did some the seal where we put the inflatable I don't remember what the material was, plastic or rubber, whatever it was. We did that in a number of pipes to reduce the inflow. Just prior to that, we had separated our storm water, from our sewage, so that way we didn't have the huge amount of water to try and process through the plant. Remember putting in some extra blowers for the aeration, so that way the digester would work better. One question, so to help me out, and so clarifier scrubber. So can you kind of explain what the clarifier does? I mean, does it remove large chunks or material, or what does the clarifier
So
actually?
your wastewater goes through an aeration process where, like I said, the bugs all thrive, and then it flows over into the clarifier. The
Okay.
clarifier just basically lets those solids settle. So it provides a calm, very low velocity flows that those solids just settle out.
So like one third of that giant circle pond we have out there.
The middle of it. That's
Okay, so that's our clarifier. Basically, it's just a settling pond.
Yeah, and it's got a mechanism at the bottom that scrapes it and collects all that solid into a central tube that then takes it to those digesters.
Okay.
But it's pretty passive settling that happens.
Gotcha. Okay, so, all right, that kind of helps me a lot there. So the overall cost between the priority 1, priority 2 looks like about a little over $6 million. Is that what we're looking at between now and 2030? So over the next 6 years, we're looking at spending roughly $6 million to cover these expenses.
Present value.
Today's value, right? All right, that's about all I had.
And some of those costs would be eligible for using SDC money on, some of them wouldn't. So you have different funding options for how to come up with that. System development charges, so you have a development.
So new developments, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they can be used to offset some of the costs. Yeah. Councilor Simon, any questions you might have?
Well, one question was, how long is the new permit good for?
I think they're 7 years. Is that right, Clint? 7 years? It's, right now though, most permits, have been expired for 15 years. And the state has been administratively extending the same permit. You're one of the early ones in getting a new permit. So I honestly don't expect that in 7 years you're going to get it renewed. But DEQ trying to catch up on all these ones that they're really late.
Councilor Thompson.
Sorry, it's fine.
I know, it's,
What's the point of the permit if you don't have to have it?
well, they'll get you later.
And actually, it is 5 years.
Only
Not
5
7 years.
Okay.
Yeah, but the way DEQ operates, it's about 10 years.
Now, is it the current permit that we're having to work on credits because of the temperature reduction for the water flow?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the temperature requirement was in your previous permit. So you haven't been able to meet it. And so what we're looking at doing to address that is by buying credits from an agency who will go and plant trees upstream or downstream along the creek to cool the creek so that the temperature influx that the city is sending from the wastewater plant has a net less increase.
Just buy a big ice cream or ice cube machine and just.
We have.
Councilor Rogers, do you have any questions? Over the board?
I guess I'm a little confused with number 4. The existing solid dewatering centrifuge to not treat well. How long we have that?
2000,
So we put that in 2000,
2000,
and we really probably haven't used it because we haven't had.
No, we ran it up until about 2020.
So what changed or? cutbacks in staffing or?
We're down a guy. It was a training issue. It was, maintenance that needed to be done on the machine. It literally needs to be taken out and sent back to Wisconsin to be rebuilt at the tune of about $40,000. And then it was a matter of, 2 men probably for a month. One guy teaching the other that you've got so many variables with that machine that, it takes somebody to babysit it while it's running. So if you've got it running 8 hours a day, there's gotta be an operator down there watching it run, because in a heartbeat, it can change values, meaning, values of the concentration of the pollen you're putting in, or the pH of the wastewater sludge that you're putting in, or the temperature. And if you're not there to push the buttons to make the adjustments, it'll just start spitting it all over the floor. And then you've got a major cleanup and possibly, if you're gone long enough, a spill that you'd have to contact the EQ about.
I just
And
trying to wrap my head around what changed then.
it just got old. And it needed maintenance. The other thing with that machine, it was able to process 3 gallons a minute. So you're talking 100 minutes, you're talking 300 gallons. It was just a slow dinosaur of a process that just took way too many man hours. And when we started having problems getting somebody hired, it just wasn't enough staff to deal with it. The system that they're talking about, I actually went to, when I was down in Depot Bay, they had one. And I was talking to the main operator down there, and he said, yeah, you get it tuned in, takes about a half an hour, push the button, walk away. It can run 3 days without anybody actually having to deal with it, because it's not a fast rotation like the centrifuge is. The centrifuge runs at 6,000 RPM. It runs at, he said, about 15 or 20 RPMs. It just sort of twists the water out of it, lets it strain, and you can let it run for as long as you need to.
I just don't want, I mean, we go to a big new system, I don't want 10 years later,
Not be used.
all somebody that's in the same boat as this 20-year-old.
So Mike was talking about the capacity of the centrifuge. I think we looked at the amount of solids that the city creates at the end of the planning period would be more solids than that could handle in a given. I mean, you could run it 8 hours a day, every day of the week and not be able to produce enough or go through your solids.
We were at the time, and when we first got it in 2000, we were producing about 70% of what we're producing now. And we ran it during the winter when we were stacking up on solids, and it was good, but it wasn't enough to keep us from having problems with the amount of sludge we were carrying in the system. We needed something that we could just walk away, or, as I had suggested at the time, give me a bigger machine. Give me something that'll deal with 10 gallons a minute or 15 gallons a minute. Yes, it's gonna be more expensive on up front, but we'll be able to process what we need to process in the time we've got to process.
Right. I'm curious about, we listed some other cities around our size. How are we comparable, just in generalities, to those cities? Like, are their aging infrastructure similar? Do some of them have newer equipment? Like, I mean, obviously, we're on the old end, but where are others fall?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think you're on the old end. I think most cities are fighting this and have similarly sized capital projects coming up. I know that, you know, I talked about how much inflow and infiltration there is, and that's pretty common. I mean, I would love to say it's easy to address but it's not. I mean, what you aim for on that is the low-hanging fruit. If you can reduce your total flows to the point that it offsets growth, then you're ahead of the game. But what happens with I is it just a little drip here, a little drip there, and it just all adds up. So getting those big holes, big voids are your best chance to make a difference. But we see that in most cities that we're working with.
So in the 600 pages plus, I think my big takeaway was the life expectancy table that you had. So you can go through there and you can see that we did the initial wastewater treatment plant build sometime in the early 60s. I can't peg that. It was just sometime in the early 60s. Another time in looks like in the 80s when we put I'm assuming the clarifier in. I'm assuming that was the 80s. And then another big one in 2005, minus incremental probably improvements throughout. So even if you look at the vast big improvement in 2005, we're still looking at 20 years come next year. And most infrastructure, anything industrial, 20 years is a pretty good life expectancy. So it doesn't surprise me to read so many things not going to be up, minus the current clarifier, which you said has an extended life for 50 years, and it should last.
So Woodburn, for example, theirs goes, what, 3 miles east of town. Jervis's goes about a half mile south of town in a large expansion area. I think when Aurora put theirs in, they went pretty far west. And then we were landlocked into this little area there. For our future, like you were saying, 20 years. Hang on, we're gonna go back looking for 6 more million, 12 million by then? With what we have, or is it something that?
I mean, when you have more area, you can do treatment with less technology. Right? I know the city of Mount Angel is about your same size has 15 acres, 20 acres of lagoons, right? So they can treat it through lagoons without putting any extra air in it because they have the acreage to do it. But they have that acreage. So
Is our little postage stamp size for future growth adequate?
I think it is. I think the normal cities that we work with, I mean, the treatment plant that you have is appropriately sized. I mean, if it was smaller, there are higher technologies that would treat it. But you know, one of our big recommendations was adding another clarifier, which is pretty big thing, but you have room for it. There's still room there. There's enough room to keep the same style of treatment that you have and expand for growth.
Other questions from city council?
So, you know, as I was reading through a lot of this material, things were projected out to 2030, which is 6 years from now. So we spend the 6 million now. In 2035, are we going to be looking for, you know, like Councilor Undershow over here said, are we looking for another $12 million? Is our current development plan robust enough to carry us beyond the 2030 date? So I mean, at 2035, are we going to have enough capacity to handle the wastewater and that we'll be producing at that time?
So we will generally do a 20-year forecast for this report. So we're assuming that I think we went out to 2045. So we did 21.
And some of those numbers, yes.
So that's the numbers that we're kind of designing for and saying that the improvements that we're recommending will get you to 2045. And yet in 2025, you're probably going to have more improvements necessary to replace aging equipment, to upsize stuff for the tremendous growth that the city experienced in 2035.
I'm sure probably none of us will be sitting on the council at that time. But still, we have a plan for that future.
So the DEQ sort of requires that planning documents be designed for 20 years. They feel that that's the not burdening current citizens with future development more than 20 years. But 20 years being kind of that middle ground of proper planning without burdening existing citizens with what that costs.
My assumption would be anything that we invest in 2025, by 2045, we'll probably need additional investments at that point. Again, it just goes back to machinery, pumps, everything else in the beginning, except for the concrete clarifiers. I guess it'll last for longer than earthquake.
Although just a side comment here, I've been involved with the city for nearly 20 years already.
Yep.
So, not like to be here another 20 years, but.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much for the report and the detail that went into the report.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Administrator, wait, where do we go from the topic from here at this point?
So Mayor, Council, I'd also like to talk a little bit about the funding plan that we've identified for some of this. Melinda has a breakdown that I'd like her to share with you all.
So, thank you, Mayor and Councilor. So staff is currently drafting a funding plan for these recommended improvements for our wastewater treatment plant and sewer collection system. And part of that plan is going to include coordination with all the outside funding agencies in what's called a one-stop meeting, where you get all the funding agencies, the city engineers together, and we look at all of the different options, whether it's any available grants at that time, the low interest state loan, which is similar to what we received for a portion of our water system improvements. That type of loan can often come with some forgivable debt as well, which is what we also received for the water system. We do have, as council is aware, we have a fairly good amount of savings in our water construction fund, both from the reuse fees that are collected with every utility bill that goes out. So that's all sitting in the construction fund, ready to be put to use as cash. And we also have SDCs that we previously collected through the years. So those will be appropriately applied, based on the type of SDC that they were and what we could use them for, is what Matt kind of alluded to as well. There will be a little bit of consideration also in our pending rate study that we have scheduled to complete as soon as the DEQ officially approves this plan. And there's always the potential with the bond as well. I believe somebody had a question about that as well. But once we have kind of that plan crafted and ready to what staff believes is the best option for the city, staff will make a presentation to council and let you know the details and make a recommendation, and then it will be up to council to approve the funding plan that we've come up with.
So based off of assuming a $6.05 million project as current value, how much do we have currently sitting in savings and or even SDC charges that we've collected already? Do we have any idea of how much of that might be made up? Percentage, it would be 10%, 15%?
Right, so we currently have approximately 1.8 million in savings.
And that would be SDC and
A
savings.
combination of the SDC funds and the water reuse savings that is part of the utility bill.
Or 0.8 million?
1.8.
Yep. Okay, almost. So that's actually pretty good.
Yes.
So, okay. So you're looking at well over 25, well over 30% already.
Mhm.
When do you think you'll be ready with the rest of the details in terms of the plan? So you have a proposal when you want to come back to council then and present a more formalized plan. Is it going to be after the wastewater treatment plan is approved?
Yes, it will definitely be after the DEQ is officially signed off on the plan. And then we'll be, again, we'll have to pull schedules together with all of these outside agencies, but this is what they do. They're professionals and they're gonna help us, again, craft the best plan for the city with what's available at that time.
My only concern would be if it takes 1, 2 years, another 6% increase from present value to future value, it starts to accumulate quickly. How long does it take them usually to approve a plan, considering there's some other DEQ permits are like 15 years old?
Right.
Are they pretty quick with whoever's reading them?
So on this one, I think that they're pretty close. They had reached out to staff and our engineers and gave us a 2 to 3 week extension of when they anticipated. We pretty much run it through the 3 week, so the longer period. So I would anticipate that we're gonna see either they've got comments that they want to see changed based on the population study, or they're ready to sign off on it. So it could be any day now that we hear.
So maybe we'll get great news in 2 weeks at our March council session, or worst case.
Yep, that would be my hope. And then at that point, yes, then we'd be moving forward to actively be setting up that one-stop.
Great, because if I'm looking at a time schedule, then is it by April, May? There's no way we can get additional funds via a bond if we decided to go that route in November's timeframe, so it would have to be in the May election next year. So we're a year out easy.
Both of these projects, these priorities have to be done together? Or can there be a little bit of a gap?
They can be broken up.
But the other question might be too, do we break them up or do we bite the bullet and just try to get them all done at once?
I think if we can get the money, we get the money, right?
Yeah,
If
so I mean-
we can secure the price.
Yeah, my concern is the ever-growing inflation that we're dealing with.
And we
I'd
can
be
definitely look at
interested
the
in doing
options. We can make some predictions of what would be logical breakdowns if you were gonna do that. And that would be part of kind of the research of the plan that we're.
Somewhere in the report, I forgot which page it was on, because I'm not a detailed reader, but you did mention prior to it, you made recommendations of about 900,000 in repairs, which today is about 1.6 million or something like that. So that's my concern, is seeing the ever increasing or marching inflation and increasing costs. Well, interest rates are absolutely horrendous right now. Okay, besides the point, okay, what else do we need to discuss on this, Mr. Wade? Anything else?
I think that's it. Again, like Melinda said, we'll be back once DEQ has approved the plan, and we'll move forward with developing financing options for council consideration.
Quite honestly, nothing surprised me in your report in terms of the age of the facilities. Nothing surprises me that, yes, people have to eventually reinvest in infrastructure. No one likes to do it. No one likes to see it because it's not something that's pretty and it's up on top, it's below the ground. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that our toilets are flushed and it doesn't block low our houses and or we get the DEQ fines. Okay, great. I guess we'll move on to the next agenda topic then. And I thank you very much for your presentation and your updates.
Water.
Yep.
Right.
But we're already moving forward with that one. Yeah. Okay, the next agenda topic is the appointment of Administrator Waite as Budget Committee Chair. I would make a motion that we appoint Administrator Waite as Budget Committee Chair.
As the budget officer.
Budget officer. Okay, there you go.
I second that.
Okay, we have, why not? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, welcome. You are now the officer.
Budget officer.
There you go. I know the script. Okay, and with that, real quick, we always have it on there. Any other city business? I'll go around, Councilor Rogers. Councilor Thomas,
I don't know.
Councilor Steiner,
I do not.
Councilor Young.
I do not, thank you.
Okay, and I have none either, so next topic would be adjournment.
Motion we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, we are adjourned because there was no nay votes. All right, thank you all. I thought we'd be here until like 9.